The Breakers Hotel in Palm Beach, Florida, opened in its current form in 1926, the third iteration of a luxury hotel on the same oceanfront site. Henry Flagler had originally developed the location as a destination resort for the northern wealthy class in 1896. Each successive structure represented a larger and more architecturally ambitious expression of American luxury leisure, made accessible by Flagler's Florida East Coast Railway to the American establishment. The Breakers is owned by Flagler System, Inc., the charitable trust established to manage the Flagler estate's legacy assets. It has remained under this single institutional ownership structure through various legal forms since its original development. This remarkable continuity of ownership is the forensic entry point for this case. Unlike many famous luxury hotels documented in previous case files, the Breakers has survived every major crisis that destroyed or severely damaged its contemporaries. The Plaza Hotel has been closed, sold, converted, and reconverted. The Ritz Paris auctioned off thousands of its contents. The Helmsley Palace survived its owner's criminal conviction. The Trump Taj Mahal was demolished. The Roosevelt New Orleans needed a federal disaster and a $145 million renovation to recover. The Breakers, by contrast, has been continuously operated for nearly a century by the same ownership structure without a bankruptcy filing, foreclosure, eminent domain acquisition, or distressed sale. The key to its resilience is not the absence of crises, but the ownership structure that enabled it to weather them all. This episode examines single institutional ownership, patient capital, and a charitable mission with a permanent investment horizon as the structural alternative to the private equity leveraged buyout models, whose failures have been documented across multiple case files. The Flagler System's ownership of the Breakers represents the demonstrated alternative to the private equity Grand Hotel acquisition model. It features patient capital, whose investment horizon is not constrained by fund-holding periods. Return expectations are calibrated to the long-term sustainability of the institutional mission, rather than short-term financial optimization and exit requirements. Because Flagler System, Inc. is a charitable trust, the hotel's operating revenues support the estate's established beneficiaries. This creates an alignment between operating performance and an institutional beneficiary structure with an indefinite time horizon rather than one bounded by a specific holding period. This structure produces operational characteristics essential for trophy asset sustainability. Capital investment in the hotel's physical plant is not subordinated to debt service requirements. The Flagler System does not carry the heavy acquisition debt typical of private equity leveraged buyouts. Decisions about renovation, restoration, and competitive positioning are based on long-term return calculations that consider the hotel's position across decades, not short-term debt service coverage ratios over a 5 to 7 year period. The critical covenant that the Breakers' ownership has respected, and that many private equity structures have failed to understand, is the relationship between maintaining a trophy asset premium and the sustained capital investment in service quality and physical standards required to preserve it. The premium is not an extractable financial artifact. It is the result of continuous investment in the conditions that produce and sustain it. The Flagler System invests in these conditions as a matter of institutional mission, rather than as a path to exit period value maximization. This approach has allowed the hotel to maintain its competitive position for nearly a century, as the ownership structure has never been incentivized to extract value from the premium at the expense of its continuation. The appraisal of the Breakers' performance across nearly a century under this ownership reveals clear distinctions between patient capital management and exit-oriented private capital. The hotel has consistently maintained RevPAR levels among the highest in the Florida luxury resort market, even across economic cycles that severely damaged competitors with less patient ownership structures. During the 2008 financial crisis, which hit the luxury hospitality sector hard, Many Florida resorts with CMBS financing and leveraged acquisition debt fell into distress. The Breakers navigated the crisis without financial strain, precisely because its ownership structure carried no such debt. This eliminated the debt service coverage ratio covenant breaches that triggered distress cycles in leveraged assets. The absence of acquisition debt is not merely a balance sheet feature. It is a competitive advantage that translates into sustained RevPAR premiums. The Breakers faces the same demand disruptions as its competitors. Luxury travel declines in every recession, but its ownership structure does not amplify those shocks into financial distress, deferred maintenance, degraded service, or reduced positioning. Another comparable model in this archive is the Ritz Paris under long-term family ownership with patient capital willing to invest in renovation at the level required to sustain the institutional premium. Both cases support the same core proposition. Trophy assets whose ownership structures match the long time horizon and capital requirements of premium maintenance consistently outperform those calibrated to private equity exit optimization. The institutional sustainability of the Breakers under charitable trust ownership creates a denial architecture that is the inverse of the patterns seen in private equity cases. In leveraged models, denial often involves portraying competitive decline as a temporary market condition rather than acknowledging the structural impact of debt service constraints on capital investment. The Breakers avoids this because its structure creates no incentive for such denial. Without debt service pressure limiting renovations, management can address issues directly through investment. However, the model faces its own challenge. Maintaining discipline and investment commitment across generations without the external pressure that debt service imposes. Privately owned trophy assets without debt can risk complacency, where the absence of financial urgency reduces the drive for operational excellence. The charitable trust structure helps mitigate this through fiduciary accountability to external beneficiaries, providing governance that substitutes for market discipline. This governance innovation, using a charitable trust to maintain institutional discipline in a debt-free trophy asset, is the Breakers' most significant contribution to the archive. It demonstrates an ownership model capable of achieving what private equity structures have repeatedly failed to deliver. This model is not easily replicated. It arose from the specific historical circumstances of Henry Flagler's estate and requires unique institutional history and legal structures. Nevertheless, its century-long success offers the clearest evidence of what effective trophy asset ownership looks like when properly designed. The Breakers continues to operate in Palm Beach as one of America's most commercially successful and stable luxury resorts. It consistently ranks among the highest RevPAR performers in the Florida market, while maintaining exceptional physical standards and service quality, sustained by the Flagler System's patient capital and long institutional horizon. In the context of this channel's archive, the Breakers stands as a positive case study of the ownership structure that prevents the institutional failure patterns documented across dozens of episodes. It has avoided hotel bankruptcy anatomy by eliminating acquisition debt and the resulting covenant breaches. It has never been subject to the private equity acquisition playbook because it is not an exit-oriented vehicle. It has escaped the trophy asset trap by refusing short-term value extraction from the premium. The closest parallel is the Ritz Paris, a trophy asset whose ownership model prioritized premium maintenance over exit maximization, whose patient capital supported necessary renovations, and whose institutional identity endured crises that damaged less well-structured competitors. This case highlights ownership structure as the primary determinant of long-term trophy asset sustainability. Given the Breakers' demonstrated success under charitable trust ownership, which specific elements of its model could institutional investors most practically adapt to create ownership structures that avoid the documented failures of the private equity playbook? The case file is open for discussion, This content was developed using artificial intelligence tools as part of the research, writing, and production process. All AI-generated material was subject to human review, editorial intervention, and approval before publication. Factual claims, interpretive framing, creative direction, and final content decisions reflect human judgment throughout. This disclosure is provided in accordance with platform transparency standards for AI-assisted content.